25, nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July. Welcome to American Spectrum. Easy voices in troubled times. What's going on in America and the people that make it happen. Tomorrow is the 4th of July, and American Spectrum celebrates in a conversation with a true American institution, Steve Allen, comedian, musician, TV star, and author. His new book, Hi-Ho, Steverino, is a humorous autobiographical view of his long and illustrious career as an entertainer. Steve Allen is also author of 38 books, more than 4,000 songs, and today he gives his views on freedom and the U.S. Constitution. At this particular juncture in American history, what direction might our government move into?
Well, that's one of those questions which deserves either about a 400-page answer or about a 2-hour answer in time. And since neither of those alternatives are available, I'll have to think of something rather condensed. The word that most Americans use when they are talking about their political convictions is freedom. When you start talking about freedom in the abstract with a capital F, everybody is for it. Even totalitarian people act and speak as if they are all in favor of it. But if you prod them a bit, it turns out that what they're really passionately concerned about is their own freedom. Most Americans, and I hope this doesn't come as too big a shock to the politically unsophisticated, most Americans, I don't think, have very much of a serious interest in freedom, except their own. They don't seem to care much about the freedom of those who differ with them. As a matter of fact, from time to time, scholars and academic people have made a test, and the results are always the same. There is never in the test a reference to the United States Constitution, but the test consists of a series of quite specific questions. Do you think, I'll just give you a sample here for the moment, do you think that communists and Nazis should be permitted to speak publicly and to print literature that expresses their opinions? And the overwhelming majority of Americans vote absolutely not. Those are terrible people. They shouldn't be permitted any such liberty at all. And of course, you're probably by now getting the point of the test. What happens every time they take this test is that the American people resoundingly defeat the U.S. Constitution. First of all, I don't suppose 3% of us even know much about what it is, and even among those who do, there are often heated differences of opinion. So we all should know a great deal more about freedom than we do. We should also know a great deal more as American citizens about history than we do. If you just got here from another planet and knew nothing of Earth history, and especially of European history, you might gather from certain public expressions of opinion on the question of the separation of church and state, that since states are nice and religions are nice and churches are nice, they all ought to be together. But you won't think that at all if you are familiar with European history, because for thousands of years, and even today in some parts of the world, religions and governments are together, and the results are horrible. So it's because of that horror, the long nightmare of European history, when churches could dictate their will to governments, that we don't ever want anything like that to happen in the United States. That's exactly what the Founding Fathers were concerned, is not ever to permit the mistakes of European history to be repeated here. So far, it's worked out pretty well.
Mr. Allen, do you feel that our Constitution is serving us well, or would there be some alterations that you might think would be worth of consideration?
Well, nothing is perfect. Nothing in the world of nature or the world of society even can be perfect. The only sensible application of the word perfect is to God, and if there is no God, then we're back to square one, which is that nothing is perfect at all. But even assuming that there is a God, nothing human can be perfect. I repeat, therefore, it follows that the Constitution, wonderful as it is not perfect. And of course, it therefore can be improved. But it ought to be tinkered with very carefully, very slowly, because it has served us well indeed for some 200 years. So we do not want to get to tinkering with it at the whim of public opinion. Public opinion is notoriously faulty and prone to error, prone to emotional appeals. And therefore, as I say, the bedrock of the Constitution should be very reasonably and carefully revised, but there's no reason why it can't be.
Mr. Allen, every time we seem to turn on the news, whatever the media, we're reading it, hear about a poll on this and a public opinion poll on that. And could you share some thoughts on all this proliferation of public opinion polls and what this is doing?
Yes, well, it's a good idea to find out what the people feel and what the people think and what the people know. We've already established here, at least I hope we have to the listener's satisfaction, they don't know much. Again, except for individual scholars and well-informed people, the people who go to the trouble to become informed. But we refer to our form of government as a democracy, and in a sense it is. That's not all it is, but there are democratic ideals and democratic machinery that are part of what we consider the American system. And very often we prescribe democracy as the cure for political ills suffered by less fortunate people in other parts of the world. But you cannot have successful democracy when you have widespread public ignorance. In other words, if the people cannot really think very well about significant issues, it's almost a waste of time to consult them when trying to arrive at a wise decision. It might be better if we just found out who are the, let's say, 500 most intelligent and wise and compassionate and caring people on earth and let them make all the rules for our country. I'm not recommending that, but in certain situations it would clearly be better than rule by an ignorant mob. So as long as we care about democracy, and I'm sure most of us listening now do, then we had better be concerned that the American people are better educated and better informed than they are presently.
Is there anybody whose opinions you hold in particularly high esteem?
Oh, well, there are hundreds of men and women whose opinions, for whose opinions I have enormous respect. In the new issue, which just reached me this morning, of a humanist magazine called Free Inquiry, there are letters from dozens of scholars and authorities in various intellectual disciplines that were solicited, whose views, I should say, were solicited by the editors of Free Inquiry. And I just happened to glance through it. I haven't had time to study it yet, but I noticed a very good and reasonable letter by Father Theodore Hesburgh, formerly head of Notre Dame, as I suppose many know. And again, this is a humanist and, in fact, secular humanist magazine for which Father Hesburgh was contributing a statement. And I was impressed. Some people will agree with what he said, others will differ. But I was impressed by the reasonableness and the general decency of his statement. But that's only one name. There are religious believers, there are atheists, there are agnostics, there are socialists, there are capitalists, there are a wide range of people. I don't think we'd ever want to live in a country in which only one political camp called all the shots. I know I wouldn't. Even if I agreed with them, I would feel very uncomfortable living in such a society. And in fact, we don't have to worry about it too much because there never has been such a society, and there never will be. There have been attempts to impose such societies, and some of them have lasted for decades. The recent communist collapse rang down the curtain on one very long experiment of that sort, but they never were able to achieve 100% unanimity of opinion among their people. There were always rebellions, and they had to maintain discipline with barbed wire and machine guns and prisoners' camps. So that's no way to run the social railroad.
Historically, Mr. Allen, are there some political figures that stand out through the first 200 years of our country's existence? Are there some figures that particularly stand out there?
Oh, of course there are. I did a television series some years back for the PBS, the public TV network, called Meeting of Minds. And that, for those who never saw it, I'll quickly explain. It was just one more television talk show, but all of the guests on it were important figures from history. And naturally we had distinguished Americans as guests, as well as people representing other times, other places, other cultures. So, of course, there have been distinguished men from the beginning. I recently, well, I guess it's about 2 years ago now, spent almost 3 days at Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home, in Virginia, and I was doing a documentary film, and as you may know about the film business, you work on camera for 20 minutes, then you sit around for 2 hours waiting for them to change a camera position or a light. So I never waste those chunks of time when I'm doing a film. I read or somehow study. And in this case, I was reading exchanges of correspondence between Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine, a hero of the American Revolution. And it made me very sad because it was so beautiful, so literate, so wise, so profound. Here were these two men of their time, and one of the subjects that took up quite a few letters, exchange of letters, was how to build a bridge. Now, who would expect a scholar and a statesman to be knowledgeable about bridge building? But these two men were. Today, also the beauty, the grace, the clarity of their language was an inspiration. Today there is no one in public life, to my knowledge, no one in political life, I should say, who could write a letter half that entertaining and that wise. So again, we have suffered a terrible collapse. The Founding Fathers were gentlemen of Olympian stature. Their ideals, even though they differed on many specifics, were characterized by wisdom. Even if you're talking about two mutually exclusive views, they were always expressed with clarity and wisdom within the limitations of certain basic assumptions. And that was so beautiful. And what saddened me was that I don't see it on the present social or political scene at all.
To some extent, might this be just an unavoidable consequence of our technology, and specifically the telephone, the instrument that's allowing us to talk to you?
There probably are points of connection. There is certainly a connection between our present ignorance and just lack of good, straight thinking, common sense, on the one hand, and television on the other. Television has the potential to bring us out of all this. Unfortunately, there's a little problem called human nature. And I think no matter what one's views about that are, everyone would certainly agree that if at a given moment, let's say you made an experiment, you had only 2 channels available, and on the one you had, let's say, the greatest production of Shakespeare with the world's best actors and the world's best directors and lighting masters and so forth, and on channel B you had attractive-looking women mud wrestling, I'm afraid we all know perfectly well which would get the big rating, which is to say, which of those 2 programs Americans would flock to in large numbers. It would not be the superior program, it would be the inferior program. So as long as that is built into the problem, you're never going to get anything even remotely approaching perfection in society.
There's been a lot in the media lately about television. We had Dan Quayle talking about against a television program, and even today, yesterday, the new Los Angeles police chief has spoken out against violence on television. Do we need some regulation of television, or is there some way? How can we approach that medium?
I have been warning the top executives in the networks and the studios for about a year now, by personal letters and sending out a brochure about the threat of censorship, warning these gentlemen and a few ladies that they are going to get censorship, they are going to get regulation if they don't, first of all, acknowledge that there is a serious problem in the prevalence of pornography, obscenity, vulgarity, foul language. Now, I don't question the right of anybody on earth to say any damn thing he wants in privacy. I do question his right to say it on television when 7-year-old children are watching it. And for we don't know how long, but very far back in history, we've been trying to teach our children not to use such language. There are the old jokes about, well, wash your little mouth out with soap if you use those words of that sort. And I think we were wise to so instruct our children. And yet today it's a little difficult to maintain the argument, because they can say, well, they'll mention the name of some famous multimillionaire comedian or some famous singer. He uses those languages, and he makes a lot more than you do, Daddy. He makes a lot more money, and he's very famous, and millions of people will kiss the hem of his garment. So if I'm not supposed to do it, how come he can get away with it and become a multimillionaire? These are very fair questions, to which, so far as I can see, the entertainment industry seems to be paying not a damn bit of attention. And because of their inattention, I think eventually, because I see the problem getting worse instead of better, I think you are going to see some sort of regulation and censorship imposed.
We just recently lost the most current past king of late-night TV. Have you contemplated a return to TV? Is there any hope that we might...
I have no plans to do that, no. I would not want to do a show where I had to show up 5 nights a week or 5 days a week to do anything. But of course that's no longer a requirement. It's not possible to tape 2 and 3 shows a day. So I'm not totally closing the door, but I'm doing nothing whatever personally to bring any of that about.
Could you outline briefly what your religious views are? Is that too personal, or
No, it's not too personal. I'm a member of a church of one. Some people have called me a Christian humanist. There was an article about my religious opinions the other day in the LA Times. I was raised a Catholic and was automatically excommunicated at the moment of my second marriage. There was nobody asked me whether I chose that or not. It just was stamped out by the great computer. But one of my recent books will satisfy, I think, anyone who would like to know more about my religious views. My title for it was The Mystery of the Bible, but the publisher changed the title to include my name, so that the title of it now is Steve Allen on the Bible, Religion and Morality.
I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy, Yankee Doodle do or die, a real live nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July. I've got a Yankee Doodle sweetheart, she's my Yankee Doodle joy. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony. I am that Yankee Doodle. Yes, I'm that Yankee Doodle. I am that Yankee Doodle boy.